to talk about crossover turns, but before we can really get into crossover turns, we need to talk a little bit about the history of the individual medley. Now, as we know, butterfly wasn't an approved stroke until 1952, and there were individual medley events before that. The first individual medley event was the 150 individual medley, which was from breaststroke, backstroke, and then freestyle. In 1952, when butterfly was ruled a legal stroke, then the 200 IM became a standard event, and it started in the order that we know it as today: butterfly, backstroke, breaststroke, and then freestyle. In the 1960s, we see a lot of swimmers doing what's called the bucket turn, or a backflip turn, where they touch the wall on their back, do a backflip, and then push off the wall on their stomach. We do, however, see swimmers doing a crossover turn motion, or something that looks very similar to our modern crossover turn, because that is a turn that they were already using from backstroke to backstroke. And of course, we have some swimmers swimming in the 60s at the elite levels still doing open turns from backstroke to breaststroke. Throughout the 70s, 80s, and 90s, there's still a heavy mix of what elite level swimmers are doing for their back to breaststroke turns. Some are still doing the traditional bucket turn. We see some turns that look very similar to what we know as the crossover turn now, and we see quite a few swimmers still doing the open turns, even at the Olympic Games. In the late 90s and early 2000s, we start seeing more and more swimmers at elite level competitions like World Championships and Olympic Games using a crossover style turn, but it's still not ubiquitous throughout the sport. It really wasn't until 2008 when we started seeing almost all swimmers at the elite levels use the crossover turn from back to breast in the IM events. And it's not until even after the 2012 Olympic Games when we start seeing the crossover turns being used at age group level meets. And crossover turns are still a topic of debate among swim coaches today. In fact, some swim coaches believe, and there's some evidence to prove, that the bucket turn is a faster turn than the crossover turn. And there are many people who still believe that the open turn is the best turn because you can get a full breath to make sure you can really attack your pullout on breaststroke. All in all, it seems that most data supports that really from the flags in until the flags out, the crossover turn is the fastest turn. You get to carry the most speed into the wall and conserve the most speed coming off of the wall. And that's one reason why we at Missoula Aquatic Club like to emphasize using that crossover turn. There's a couple of things I'd like to pose as questions, though. I mean, very early on, in the early history of the individual medley events, we see that not a lot of swimmers are doing open turns. They're doing the bucket turn. They're doing a crossover style turn very, very early on in the sport. And it didn't catch on for a very long time. And this raises a few questions for me. What does it mean that people were using a crossover style turn as early as the 1960s, and yet it didn't become popular until just a few years ago? What does it mean? What does it mean for our sport? How individualized is technique? How individualized is race strategy? What can we be doing to ensure that we're pushing the boundaries of the sport, to make sure that we're always on the competitive edge and doing exactly what we can to be the best, have the best possible techniques, have the best possible turns, and have the best possible race strategies?